Hello and welcome. This is NTA Tuesday Live and I'm Cyril Stober. Now, over the years, the Nigerian youth have proven to be a potent tool in leading strategic movements and championing a national cause towards building a stable, viable and progressive nation. But how have the numerous layers of leadership development in the country advanced the interest of the youth and put them in the proper trajectory in the desire to attain nationhood? Tonight, NTA Tuesday Live will focus on youth inclusivity and nation building. And we have in the studio those who know where the shoe pinches. But before we go into the conversation, let's get to see this report put together by correspondent Olayinka Ojo.
The young have passions, dreams, and hopes. This is because the youth of a country are the future and represent the most dynamic section of the population.
As a young person, you understand the capabilities that you possess, and those capabilities, if you translate them or you transmit them to other sectors of our national existence, you will see that we'll begin to make progress as young people. And again, let me also say, what develops a nation is not the amount of wealth at the disposal of citizens or the amount of population we have. What develops a nation is love for country.
Since youths and their actions contribute to the development of any nation, the value of a country is known by its people.
As a youth, if you are patriotic and you are not productive, you cannot add value to the nation. And if you cannot add value to this nation, you cannot be part of solving the security challenge that is facing this nation.
It is therefore the intelligence and the work of the people which leads to the progress of nations.
Nigeria is a collective responsibility. If I play my part as an individual, you play yours, together we can move the nation to a better place. So in my own little space, in my office, in my house, I'll make sure that whatever I do, my actions do not go against my neighbor. Whatever I do is for the unity of not just myself, but for the country at large.
Today, they are not just seen as leaders of tomorrow, but also partners in shaping today's world.
Work hard and be self-reliant. Don't rely too much on the government. Be innovative.
Everybody can be an entrepreneur. You know, it's one industry I see, or one phase of life I see that can accommodate everybody.
I'm just interested in bead making because it's part of culture. Skills I learned from the camp, I think I will be able to have something doing, even if I didn't get job.
And if young people take serious the work for the development of the country, irrespective of tribe, religion, and gender, they can become important elements of the nation and contribute immensely to its growth and development as social actors of change and progress.
Intergenerational gaps have increased and generations have changed. But young people believe that they can, if they get involved, that they can further equip government.
Every nation that wants to prosper must bank on the collective strength, energy, potentials of their younger generation.
Government need to be interested. They need to be interested in data. They need to be interested in feedback as well.
This is why youth advocates say it is vital to empower the youths to take charge of their lives. Olayinka Ojo, NTA News.
That report sets the tone for tonight's discussion. Let's introduce our guest to you. I'd like to welcome to this program Rinsola Abiola is a youth and gender advocate. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much for having me, sir.
Let me also introduce Dr. Obinna Ibrahim, a political strategist, public affairs analyst, and public health physician. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here today.
And we are also joined tonight by Johannes Toby Wujuola, former curator, Abuja Global Shapers.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. Let's go straight into this discussion. And as we prepare to go in, yes, we have one more who joins us via Zoom from Accra, Ghana. That's Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa. Hello, Samson. Good to see you tonight.
Hi, good evening.
All right. Thank you. Well, let's begin to look at the issues here. We do know from records that those we refer to as the fathers of the nation, who were the leaders who fought for independence and all that, were youths at the time they did all that. Most of them were 30 and below 30.
Yes, sir.
And they did all that, fought for independence. What is the position of today's youth?
I would say that as far as our fathers, founding fathers and others who are currently in positions of authority today, as far as their story goes and as far as our story has unfolded so far, the apple really hasn't fallen very far from the tree. The only difference seems to be that they rose to prominence at a time when opportunities were perhaps not as widespread as they are now, and it was a lot easier to find young people who were educated, who had certain skills. They didn't exist in the kind of numbers that we have educated, exposed young Nigerians now. So it seems as if the opportunities then were enough to go around. It was very easy for young, educated, resourceful people to rise to prominence then, as opposed to now when a lot of people are skilled, a lot of young people are educated, and then it seems as if the window of opportunity is shrinking because of the sheer number of young people that we have. If we look at Nigeria's population, young people make up easily about 70% of the population of this country. And we're trying really hard. Nigerian youths are doing quite well when it comes to different sectors. Entrepreneurship, when you look at the tech world, quite a number of young Nigerians have put the country on the map globally with the kind of innovation that we're seeing from Nigeria. Look at entertainment, look at politics as well. We have quite a number of young people in the political space. I'm a member of the APC, and during the elections, it was actually essentially young people who ran the campaign from the background, and quite a number of young people were involved as well. So we have young people actually contributing their quota to development of our country from the different sectors. And even within the civil society space, it is driven largely by young people. It's young people you'll find in the civic space calling for reforms. A lot of the Electoral Act amendment, the campaign for it was driven largely also by young people and organizations led by young people. So I would say that we're not doing badly if we were to compare with those who came before us. Young people in Nigeria have remained very active, but the challenge seems to be, as I said, breaking through. We have a lot of challenges to face now. There's the issue of financial lack of empowerment. I wouldn't say financial empowerment, which seems to be limiting quite a number of young people, particularly from aspiring to higher office within the political space.
All right, we'll look at some of those factors militating against the movement of young people, but let's come to Dr. Obinna Ibrahim. And easily the same question goes to you. You have a situation where people below the age of 30 were already in leadership positions and occupied very high governance positions. You don't see that now, and you see people on the other side who are mostly occupying the space, and there are those who feel that the youth are relegated and they have to struggle to get things done.
Yeah, so I think that there have been a shift. In the past, young people were given an opportunity in governance, but over time, there was this concept, I think it was mentioned in the little clips we watched before we started discussion, where the notion of youths or young people are the leaders of tomorrow. And what happened was young people were now kept at the fringes of governance, right? And over time, they were not involved in decision making, and their interests were not accommodated, and gradually it tightened the space for young people in governance. But while that was happening, young people began to show their potentials, their skills in other sectors. So you see young people doing well in finance, in the entertainment industry, even in medicine, in science, in research. So I think that we need to return back to those days where young people were given greater opportunity in governance. And there are countries who are doing it right. After the crisis in Tunisia, there was a deliberate attempt to ensure that in local councils, 30% are occupied by young people. There is also intentional effort to ensure that young people are celebrated such that you know their capacity. There's also an intentional effort to train young people. So these are ways you can include young people, not just ensuring that they are well represented in governance, in decision making, but also making sure you're building their capacity in political literacy, in civil education, to make sure that they are well equipped, and then also making sure that you're celebrating those young people that are doing well, and by so doing, making it known to the ruling class that we have young people who are capable and who can really take up position of leadership, position of governance, and really make a positive impact. And it's not something that young people are not asking because of the age, because they are young people. They're asking for this, they are demanding this because, one, they have the capacity, they are doing well in other sectors. And then also they are a major demographic. They occupy a huge, a greater percentage of the population. And if democracy, if it's about the people, right, then that group, that majority group, right, should be well represented. Because, and also whatever happens, also they affects them more. Because if you have the greater population, then if things go well or go bad, it affects you more. So this should be involved, and there must be an intentional effort. That's what happened in the past. There was an intentional effort to include young people then. It wasn't just by mistake. But right now, we need to get back where we are intentional about it. Thank you.
All right. Well, Toby, today's youth certainly more equipped than those who were called young leaders
of those days,
pre-independence and at independence. They're better educated, better exposed, and so you would expect that they would be in a position to play greater roles than those in the past. Is it happening?
I would want to borrow from some points that my sister and my brother have made already, and from three perspectives. One, space. Two, interest. Three, capacity. Space. Like Rinsola had mentioned, the space available for leadership then, there were more vacuums then than we have now. We have a much more larger population comprising of both the older population and the younger population. And connecting to this issue of space is the concept of interest. I would say over the years, we didn't see so much young people interested in governance or in playing governance roles. I would say that it's barely the last decade that we have seen a growing interest in people saying that, in young people particularly saying, I want to go into politics. I want to be in governance. I want to serve in public service. Before this time, it's been very I'm okay where I am. Whatever happens, happens. And one of the reasons that we have seen this, spike in interest is the internet age. People are more connected to governments via their internet. People can now see, or young people particularly, can now see the impact of bad governance on their lives. Young people can also see good governance in other climes by watching videos on YouTube. So there is now a spike in that interest of, I think I need to play a role. We now have an active civil society that is not just saying that we want a better Nigeria, but it's saying that we want a space to play a part in this better Nigeria. Now, coming down to capacity, I would say that beforehand, young people, given the fact that there was little space, given that there wasn't that much interest, we're not really building the necessary capacity, the mental acuity for the kind of leadership that governance requires. Political participation, you would see that in a political party, for instance, even the youth leader was in his 40s or 50s. Why? Because even the young people within the party were not even interested in those roles. The entire NWC, National Working Committee and what have you, were all filled with older people. Why? Because the young people were not really necessarily interested. And then, consequently, we're not being built with the necessary capacity that will enable them for those roles. And there, you had a trust deficit, because the older generation is now wondering, should we pass this baton to a younger generation that may not have the capacity to take over these roles? And then it's a trust deficit without necessarily even testing the waters whether they had the capacity. And so these three perspectives, space, interest, and capacity, created a vacuum of young people in those roles. But are those things the same today? Absolutely not. I think as of today, we have a huge bulge of young people who are smarter, better equipped to take over leadership, to take on the challenges, and mind you, not limiting it to just the room space of being members of the National Assembly or being leaders in the executive, but even in the boardroom, in the private sector boardroom space, which we have seen young people actually excel in Nigeria particularly, and in government organizations as well, so to say. So I think capacity has been developed. It is still being nurtured, because I would say that regardless of how smart, how intelligent the young person is, he cannot take or you cannot take away the importance of being groomed, of learning some new ropes every now and then that the older generation will pass on. Interest, like I said, is now peaked compared to a few years back, but now the space, I think, is more limited than it was a couple of decades back.
All right, let's see if we can go back to Samson Itodo, who joins us via Zoom from Accra. Samson, are you there? If you are, yes, trends are changing, but are they changing fast enough as to harness this resource of the youth, all their energies, and channel them towards nation building? Are things moving fast enough as they should, given the huge population we have?
Well, thanks. I think it's moving. Yes, things are moving, but are they moving fast enough? My view is I don't think we're moving fast enough in harnessing the huge potential that we have within the youth population. I think it's important to properly, classify who are these young people, because conceptually, there's always a dissonance with respect to the age category that we talk about. So some say the youth category is 18 to 35. Nigeria's national youth policy says they are between 15 and 29. The Africa Youth Charter, says they are 18 to 35. And so it's important to properly classify which age category are we referring to. And I speak as someone who was previously a young person within those age classifications and not a youth. So I'll speak from that perspective. And I say that when you talk about young people and youth, it's important, to note what are the fundamental issues that confront this very important segment of our society. That demographically, you have, a large youth population who can not only serve as a catalyst that can drive development, but that the entire conversation about the future is about this category of young people. And so if you look at our investment in education, you look at our investment in health, if you also look at our investment, in other sectors of our national life, it tells you whether we are making the required investment in this very important segment of our population. And so we've dealt with the issues around, the conceptual issues that we need to address. And I think that if you compare the last 20 to 30 years, we've made tremendous progress with respect to investment in young people. It's just that, could we have done more? Yes, because the country could have done more given the resources, given, the potential that it has. But the youth population, have continually remained an asset that has not been tapped, whose potential has not been tapped. Yes, there are different intervention programs introduced by different administrations in the last 20 years, but then we need to make more investment, in this population. So yes, we've made progress, but there's a lot more that we can do with investing in that population. And I want to note that the challenges of youth underdevelopment didn't start yesterday. It's predated the last 2 decades. Because when you look at Nigeria's journey to nationhood, if you look at our history and our evolution, as we talk about, all the different waves and the different contours and junctures within our democratic journey, you also look at the place that young people, play and how this has impacted on youth development. If you look at political leadership, yes, in the last 2 decades, we've seen, increased the number of young people who have played different roles in shaping Nigeria's democracy and also shaping public leadership. If you go through issues around security, if you look at even as far as management of national security, you've also seen how young people have constantly played positive roles. So the argument is not whether young people are either playing unique roles, but the question is, are we making the required investments in the right places and at the right time? My answer is no.
All right, thank you. We'll return to you shortly. Back here in the studio in Abuja, Sola Abiola.
Yes, sir.
You talked about a lack of empowerment in certain respects.
Yes, sir.
Would you say it's deliberate? Because there is would you say it's deliberate to keep the youth out of such key positions? Because there is some kind of suspicion of them taking over and confining the older generation to the background. Is it an instinct of survival?
So I would say that that particular challenge, especially when it comes to funding, as it pertains to politics, is not something that's unique to young people. a lot of people who don't fall within the youth age bracket also experience that particular challenge. Politics is expensive, especially if you're running for office. So it's not it's not unique to Nigeria alone. The fact that a lot of young people have to struggle if they're trying to break through the ballot. Women also experience this, and then even the older, more established politicians, it's actually very rare to find any politician at all who funds their own campaign 100%. We usually have people who chip in. So I think, again, as a people, we need to learn to put our money where our mouth is. And if we really want to support young people, for instance, to be able to emerge through elective office, then we should be willing to support those that we believe in and those whom we believe can deliver, because it's not something that most of us can do alone. I don't even think any of us can do it alone. We all rely on support from friends, from family, from well-wishers. In advanced democracies, people usually contribute to campaigns for candidates that they support, and I think we should learn to do that here as well, because it also gives us it enables us to be better able to hold elected officials accountable if we support them through the entire campaign process. So I think that is more of a general challenge. And then looking at empowerment generally, I think one of the biggest challenges that any government has to deal with is the allocation of resources. There are lots of competing priorities. There's healthcare, there's education, there's infrastructural development, there's security. And we've had quite a number of investments in young people to develop entrepreneurial skills. I know during Dr. Jonathan's time, we had the UWIN, which was like a lottery of sorts for young people to submit business ideas and then get support from government. The Buhari administration has had the National Youth Empowerment Fund. We've had a lot of funds like that from different organizations for even agriculture, the Bank of Industry. So we've done what we can actually to support young people, women, different categories of citizens with regards to empowerment. But then it's still pretty difficult to expect that we're going to be able to make funds available to support everybody. So I would say that the financial challenge is not deliberate per se, but it's something that we can all come together to counter as a people. Now, on other challenges generally, I would say that while young people have been very active, and for instance, during this administration, we got the Not Too Young to Run bill to scale through, which lowered the age of eligibility for elective office. We're making baby steps. We're taking those steps towards ensuring that young people are not so disenfranchised. And however, it's so very important that political parties go beyond just saying we support youth to actually having policies that make it easier for young people to emerge through the party system. And again, because I do both gender advocacy and youth advocacy, we're not going to be able to have the equitable level of representation through the ballot alone. And it's also key that we look at appointed positions as well. And moreover, not everybody who is interested in politics or who has leadership acumen is going to want to participate or contribute to nation building through elective office. Some people have everything that it takes to contribute their quota through appointed office. So I believe it's also very key that government does the needful when it comes to ensuring adequate youth representation through appointments. If we look at the uprisings in recent history, whether it was the Arab Spring or chaos started across different countries due to lack of empowerment, economic factors, these issues are usually youth-led. In Nigeria, we had the NSAS, which happened as a result of continued police brutality against young people particularly, the profiling. You dress somehow, they conclude you're into crime. So these things, it's usually young people who come up, who say we've had enough. And a lot of it also boils down to the fact that young people feel excluded. So it's actually very important that going forward, we try to correct the situation by ensuring that young people are better represented in governance at all levels, and not just at the federal level, but also at the state level and at the local council level as well.
Let's use the last general election as an example. We say we have a huge youth population, and expectedly we would imagine that they would want to be more involved in the process of determining who leads the country. We had quite a number of relatively I say that young people who ran for office, political office, I mean, if you consider the average age of those who had been running for political office, we had quite a number of them. At the end of the day, it was poor showing in all aspects. And I'm wondering, where was the army of youths who didn't quite give the support to one of their own? What happened?
So, the election is a process, and first of all, the young people participated greatly in the 2023 election. I think the data I saw has about 39.43% of the voting population were young people, I think between 15 and 34 years old. So they participated. But then talking about running and then emerging victorious, it's a process that starts from the party primaries, right? And in fact, before the party primaries, you have to purchase the forms, right? So the question is, are the forms made accessible to young people? And when I mean accessible, I want to move towards what my colleague Rinsola mentioned about the cost of governance, the cost of politics, right? Now, a young person who has the capacity and who has the integrity have maybe stayed on this earth for about 30 to 30 or 40 years, would he had made enough money to purchase the forms, right? So is it accessible? That's the first step. So can they even have purchased the forms, right? And when they purchase the forms, the process of getting elected when the primaries, be it direct or indirect, as you know, it's very expensive. Can a young person afford it, right? And then I think my colleague also my colleague also mentioned something around trust deficit, right? Do the political class, do they trust young people to allow them to come together and then raise funds for them? Because in politics it's not cheap anywhere, right? But they need the political class needs to trust you to rally around you and make sure you emerge. And it's not always about the money, it's also about consensus. When the political class come out to say, okay, we are moving along this line, do they trust young people enough to say we are adopting this young person for this position? Most times what happens is that they adopt the older people because of that trust deficit, right? So that's why in my earlier statement, we must be intentional about youth representation. And one way to do it, in addition to maybe reducing the cost of politics and all that, is also ensuring the quota system. When you see that you have a young population that cannot play with the older ones, you can ensure fair representation by ensuring a quota. So let's say if we say 30% of all appointees, 30% of the legislators that would emerge from a party must be young people below 35, below 40, right? Then it's more like giving, and that space is protected for young people. And as I said, it's not because of the age. We're not asking because of the age. We're asking because we have the capacity. My colleagues have mentioned we have young people doing very well in all sectors, right? Why don't you get them into governance? You see, my colleagues also mentioned about you win all the policies, right? Now, most times what we see is the older ones making policies for young people. But it's different when the young people is seated on the table, because he will bring a perspective that no matter your age and intelligence, you would not see it the way a young person sees it, right? So it's important that we are intentional. It's not something that we can leave to chance. It's not something we can say, okay, let young people go and purchase the form, run for election. And we must be intentional about building their capacity, ensuring fair representation, showcasing that young people have the capacity. I think when we do this, that's when young people will then have a fair representation in governance. That's when you will see that policies, right, would have the hearts of young people in those policies. And you see that when they are implemented, the young people will benefit more than they benefit today. So that's my position.
Well, Toby, is there a cultural barrier somewhere? I mean, let's look at our culture, which says, oh, there are certain things the younger people are not meant to say or not meant to be where older people are, and therefore there are positions of trust which younger people are excluded from. Culturally, do we have cultural barriers? It's part of the challenge here.
Come to think of it, I've never really looked at it from that perspective. But I would say that there are cultural barriers. And it comes from the concept of how even the home is managed and how responsibilities are passed on to the younger generations. A young person saying they want to aspire for certain positions, or even saying I want to be this or that, and you see an older person say, no, it's not your time, or why don't you go and take this other one? This is leave that one for this other person. This is you are not there yet. I don't see, you don't have what it takes for it. And it comes from also the thinking, and with due respect to our elders who see certain things that we cannot see, that you're not fit for the role yet. You need to grow, or you need to learn certain lessons. But mind you, that this is ubiquitous. Let's not make it a Nigerian problem. Across the world, it is still a struggle. And of course, we have some good examples where young people have broken the ceilings or shattered the glass and, emerged in certain positions or have been given qualitative leadership positions and are doing successfully well across the world. But let us not pretend that across the same world, young people in various climes are facing challenges in which they are not being given the kinds of the kind of leadership position that they feel that they can take. And it still comes back to the thinking that, are they fit for it? Have they grown the ranks for it? And I would have a very odd opinion. While I think that young people deserve to be given opportunities of leadership, I equally think that needs to be balanced with grooming and training. And it has to be deliberate, like Dr. Obina has said. We need to be more deliberate about creating certain opportunities, even if it's a quota. Not necessarily saying that we must give 20% of all these positions to young people, but saying that certain positions of leadership should be left for young people. That gives them, or for instance, you have the House of Reps positions, or the state houses of assembly for elective positions. You have certain appointee positions that young people could start the journey of leadership from. Because as much as we want to be very ambitious about leadership, we must not play down the role of being groomed to learn the ropes that nobody just becomes a giant overnight. You grow into it. You don't just wear a size 44 shoe as soon as you're born. You grow into it. And that, I think, we must also place side by side as we pursue the opportunities for young people to play roles in leadership. And that is where grooming, deliberate grooming, must play a role. And it's still, in fact, a cultural thing. And I think our cultures have something in this regard. And I mean across the entire country. There's no culture where you don't have a situation where a parent, whether it's the father to the son or the mother to the daughter, is doing one thing or the other to groom the child to say, okay, fine, you know that one day you are going to be doing this someday, and that means you need to learn how to do this. Okay, I want you to do this because someday you will also be playing this role, maybe in a bigger position. But I think it needs to be more deliberate. I think our elders need to sit down and think to themselves that I'm not going to be here someday. I'm actually going to be leaving very soon, and that means those who are coming after me must have the capacity to do even much better than I have done, and that means I must empower them with the necessary tools in capacity, in thinking, and in training, and also funding to take over the positions that we the elders are currently occupying.
All right, Samson Itodu, is the older generation playing a key role in grooming, as Toby has talked about, grooming and laying the foundation and the good example and mentoring the younger generation to take over? Is there anything we could look at and say there is a deliberate step towards this, especially when it comes to leadership positions?
Yeah, absolutely. I would substitute grooming with mentorship, if I may. So there are three things. First, there is need to make investments in preparing public leaders, and it's not just young people, across the board, because our country experiences leadership deficits, and it's just informed by this notion that the driving philosophy of public leadership is in service to the people. So over the last 3 decades or so, we flooded the public space with people who are ill prepared for public office, or a situation where public leadership is a reward for either sycophancy or loyalty to certain political class or political elite. And so the leadership recruitment philosophy needs to be reviewed. So it's not just about young people, it's about a leadership philosophy that needs, to be interrogated. When you deal with the philosophy and you address that, then your political parties, when they nominate candidates, they won't subject the process to only the highest spender and the highest bidder. They won't subject the process to certain parochial and primordial sentiments. Instead, it will be about who has the capacity to deliver on the party's mandate, the party's programs, but more importantly, who has the capacity to solve problems, as well as someone who has the capacity to manage our diversity. Because the whole notion of public leadership, in addition to harnessing, the resource and the potential within a society, you're dealing with a political community with diverse interests, diverse views. So you need someone or leaders who can manage diversity. So it's critical. So your political parties will now be guided and informed by that philosophy. And that way, you can have young people, women, and even persons with disability have an opportunity to get into public leadership. Because first, the whole recruitment process is one that is inclusive, is one that is democratic, and is one that ensures that there is level playing field for all. The third critical thing, and when a leadership philosophy is defined, is that political parties will now make investments on honing the leadership skills of those who they select as candidates within the political parties. Unfortunately, 90% of Nigerian political parties do not have a leadership development, program. Because when you talk about leadership, we must look at this from 4 prisms. The first one is, what's the leadership recruitment philosophy? What's the leadership recruitment strategy? What's the leadership retention strategy? As well as the leadership transition plan within a political party. Now, when political parties have this clearly spelled out, then the opportunities to have young people and women in public office will be high. And the last point I will make is the fact that when you talk about leadership development, we also need to situate it within the broader context of political socialization. And if you look at those platforms, check all the platforms that should be platforms that inspire and instill leadership values of young people. Check the health of those institutions. A lot of them have either been politicized or they've been decimated by the same political class. So you look at the National Youth Council, you look at the Nigerian Youth Parliament, you look at the National Association of Nigerian Students. All these institutions are platforms for honing and building leadership skill in young people. But where are they today? So when we have this conversation, it's important to look at this broadly, that as a country, we need to come to a conclusion that leadership is critical for our development and we make the required investment. And you can't treat leadership isolated from things like education, like health, like security, like jobs. It is critical and it's important. So for me, those will be, the different strands, and not just political leadership. Because quite frankly, if you check the entire country, there are only 558, elective offices in elections conducted by INEC, and then you have about 993 other constituencies, or you have 8,008 wards. So if you have 8,809 wards, that's about and plus 1,558 plus or minus across the entire country, you have less than 2,000 less than 11,000 elective offices. So everyone cannot get into public office, but you require, in the civil service, you have appointive positions. What's the quality of people who are manning those positions? Because national development is a shared responsibility with those who are appointed, including those who are elected.
Okay. Well, we also have a couple of reports, and we'd like to take the first of them. This one is from Ibadan.
Often regarded as the leaders of tomorrow, are the engine of growth and development in every society. They provide the labor force for production of goods and services and are critical masses of people whose actions and inactions can develop or mar the fabrics of the society.
If not because they are brilliant, by the time they travel abroad, why are they showcasing knowledge? Why are they showcasing talent? They are brilliant. They can contribute enormously to the growth of this nation.
Unfortunately, because of the economic recession, many of our youths had lost focus, and some of them are taken into other measures that are not conventional.
Over the years, we have been clamoring for youth engagement in policy making, in development, so as to contribute our own quota to the development of our beloved country. The youth need to be engaged basically by involving the youth in policy making.
When you look at the number of youth that registered to vote, between age 45 and 18 constituted over 75% of the voting population. The youth conducted the election because the bulk of 1.4 million that were recruited by INEC as ad hoc staff were students of federal tertiary institutions, even the journalists, the security agents, the civil society organizations, and including the drivers.
The youth are said to be the future of any country, but the future can only be bright if investment is made in them to ensure they are included in the development of the nation.
The only way that the youth's role or the youth contributions to the nation development can be harnessed is for the government to first of all restructure our educational sector. When they do that, again, they just have to also wake up some of these moribund companies so that this youth can be engaged formally.
And so the only thing we can only do is to appeal to our country, to our leaders, that please, let's make our system work. Let's create an enabling environment for the young people to thrive.
In Nigeria, statistics show that the youth constitute about 70% of the population. Hence, it is expected that this quantum of population should be a great asset for the Nigerian nation if they are harnessed and utilized in the right direction. In Ibadan, Wahid, NTA News.
All right, our next report is from Kano, still along the same lines.
Because of their mental, intellectual and physiological strengths are key to the development of any society. In Nigeria, its history would not be complete without taking note of the contribution of youth who utilized their full potentials and fought for the nation's independence from various fronts. Among the heroes the nation remembers of Kano extraction was General Murtala Muhammad, whose role was critical in inspiring other African leaders, and all that he achieved were at the useful age bracket up till the time he left the world.
And he contributed immensely in the socio-economic development of Nigeria. He fought corruption seriously to the level that corruption was almost totally annihilated from Nigeria.
In the political front, Malam Aminu Kano led many of his contemporaries and disciples in a movement that led to the liberation of the common man. As the commercial nerve center of the North, Kano is known for his contribution to the economic growth of the nation, with two of his sons, Aliko Dangote and Abdulsamad Rabiu, leading in the country's business front. They all became millionaires when they were youth, and youth are still working in the business city towards inspiring the future generations.
Kano is blessed with youth that are productive. In fact, the economy of Kano is in the hand of the youth.
Go to economic sectors, banks, industries and so on, you see the youths take the leadership position, take the skilled and unskilled labor. So even when it comes to the kind of politics we are, you find that youths are the major contributors of the political development in the country.
In all the formal and non-formal sector, youth are doing greatly, managing all the sectors, like this school teacher, Munirat Abdul Qadir, who takes pride in her job of training the younger ones.
We are producing creative members of the nation, and in 10 to 20 years, they have learned a lot, coupled with what they will see and then the experiences, of course, they would make Nigeria a better place.
One of the fundamental things we need is mentorship. The youth of nowadays have no mentors. We only think we want to end up today or tomorrow, become governors, House of Reps, senators and so on, but it doesn't work that way.
With the nation tilting towards knowledge and ICT-driven economy, the youth are ready to drive the nation into prosperity. This, however, relies on how best the nation harness the potentials of its youth. In Kano, Aminu Umar, NTA News.
Well, back here in the Abuja studio, we just heard that report, and someone talked about the youth not having enough mentors. Samson Itodo also spoke about leadership recruitment process. Sure. But we would also ask and say, are the youth seeing any good example from the older generation? I mean, we've had situations on the flip side of it where much younger people have been entrusted with very sensitive positions, and they have just performed as woefully as the older generation, just spewing out what they learned from the older ones. Have the older generation failed the youth in preparing them to be part of nation building?
So in answering this question, I'm going to refer to developments within the space of my own political party, which is the APC. Our President-elect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, is somebody who is very well known for mentoring people. And that was actually one of the very key things that we promoted about him during the run-up to the elections. The fact that this is a man who has contributed a great deal to human development, who has mentees, not only in politics, but in the private sector as well. I actually organized a program highlighting that. So it's a good thing that we have that kind of example now stepping in to be the president of this country. It kind of just shows that investing in the younger generation is not it's not a thankless job, and it's not something that cannot be done. This is a man who has invested in other people and is now at the very highest position possible within our country. As you know, in a couple of days, by God's grace, he will be our president. So that's actually a very good case for mentorship and the importance of mentorship. And you can see his mentees in different sectors within the public service: the Speaker of the House, the Governor of Lagos State. We have former governors, ministers, people who have benefited from his mentorship. And then in states like Kaduna and Lagos, we also have a leadership development program. Kaduna has the Kashin Ibrahim Fellowship, and Lagos has the Latif Jakande Fellowship, which is supposed to nurture young people who are interested in public service particularly. So I would say that yes, there is a gap when it comes to mentorship, when it comes to leadership development, but some people have identified that it is a need, and they are working towards filling that vacuum. And we can only hope that others will borrow a leaf from those who are already doing it, and also do what they can to ensure that young people are supported. And then within the private sector as well, because as Samson rightly noted, the public sector can't possibly accommodate everyone, and not every young Nigerian is interested in politics and leadership from the public service side of things. So within the private sector as well, there are quite a number of people who are known for supporting other young people. But as much as possible, we need to encourage those who have reached the pinnacle of their respective careers to do what they can to support those who are just coming on board. For those of us who are women within the private sector, there are a number of gender-based organizations that are filling that vacuum and providing that role, that support that women in the private sector need. And within the political system as well, some of us are doing what we can to also provide a network to support women within the political space. So mentorship is very key. Mentorship is what helps us to hone our skills, and it's also very important. I think it's very key that we address a particular thing. For me particularly, our culture is rather ageist. I'm from the Southwest. I would say that you're more likely to find a very young official get elected. It's more likely to happen up north than it is to happen from the southern or the southwest region of the country. It's our culture. Our culture is very big on ageism. There's nothing wrong with it. We're to defer to those older than we are, but it's also key that we identify and nurture the talent and the skills in those who are younger. And that is one thing that I greatly admire about Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, our president-elect. He's been able to do that. He's been able to lay that example, and I'm really hoping that the way he gave opportunities to people who are quite young, others learn to do the same for younger people as well.
Well, at this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll expand this conversation and find out just beyond appointed positions, what else can be done to include highly skilled, professional. Thanks for staying with us. This is the part of the program where you can join in the discussion in the studio. The numbers will be on the screen. You can take advantage of those numbers and call in to be part of the conversation here. And now let me just remind you of the process and the procedure. If you're calling in tonight and your call gets through to the studio, do us a favor, turn down the volume of your TV set. That's the way to avoid the hurlback or the echo. I would like to encourage you to go straight to the point, not bother too much about greetings. A simple hello would do. We expect that a lot of young people will join in this conversation and speak about the things they believe should be done to give them more access to helping shape the country as it is. And speaking about that, let's Let's look at what Risola has said about mentoring and the difference in cultures in different parts. She thinks in the southwest it would be a little more difficult to put younger people in positions than it would be in the north of the country. But some people step out deliberately to make a difference. Now, we're looking at a new dispensation in a couple of weeks from now. What should we be looking out for beyond just appointing people to? Because sometimes I worry about appointments, and I worry, I tend to see them sometimes as tokenism. Now, beyond that, what are the deliberate things we need to do to get the youth involved in building the nation?
So I think that there should be a philosophical change, a change in mindset. And this is something the President-elect, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, is known for, going for the best hands. One thing no one can argue is that the people he has chosen and appointed have grown because of the capacity. He's intentional about capacity. So I think that one thing we can do beyond speaking about appointment or quota or all that, it's focus on capacity, focus on result-based progress. Now, that's the difference when you compare the private sector and the public sector. In the public sector, there is this thinking, there's this mindset that, oh, you have to spend 6 years to grow to the next level. And what it does is that before young people climb to a point where they then are involved in decision making, they are very old, right? But in the public sector, a young man comes in today, right, and he achieves his deliverables and he's promoted, and before you know, when I became the country director in development space, right, I wasn't, I think I was under 35 then, and I was managing over 2,000 persons, right? But my colleagues in the public service, they have to stay how many years and years and years before they now get a director position, let alone the executive director, right, that manages. So I think that one of the things we need to do, and I think the President-elect is something that he is known for, is then that focus on capacity, focused on result-based progress and not age-based progress or other sentiments about where you come from, who you know. If we have that deliberate change in mindset, in philosophy, we will then see that the right people, and as Samson mentioned, it's not just then about age, it's about the right leadership. But I believe that when we change that mindset, you will see a lot of young people emerging. Why do I say so? Because it's not so different from the private sector. Because when the private sector focused on results-based progress and progression, right, you saw a lot of young people emerging and making their name, making great impact. So I think that in public service, we need to begin to think towards service result-based progress rather than age and other sentiments.
All right, we have our first caller tonight. Umar, calling in from Birnin Kebbi. Hello, Umar. It's been quite a while. Umar, are you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening, sir. I'm Omar from Montreal.
Yes.
Yeah, legal contributor.
Yes, I said it's been a while.
Just that because of
yes, go ahead.
Keen interest I have for this program, I have to look for fuel to power my generation. We get a problem of life this stage. About youth development, about youth in general, about power and leadership. You see, the whole idea of leadership is leadership is not given, but is taken. The elders are not ready to relinquish power just like that. The youth. That is the problem. The youth must get ready to assume the mantle of leadership. Until that is done, they are not ready to relinquish power to them. On the time immemorial, I had the adage that say leadership, youth are the leaders of tomorrow. Until these days, this tomorrow did not come, and it will never come until the youth are ready to take the mantle of leadership. May God continue to bless our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umar Hanachi from Birnin Kebbi. Well, Toby, no one is going to cede leadership easily. You have to take it. All right. So this knocks the maxim that the youths are the leaders. They won't be unless they take it to say. But again, on the flip side of it, you look at it and say, those who hold on to these positions today, as the older generation, were once youths themselves. And so, what is it that they haven't learned over the years, knowing that they got these positions as young people? Why wouldn't they want to give younger people the chance?
I want to look at this from two perspectives and be also careful as well. I think that there is, and maybe I'll tap that from some of the comments that my brother Samson had said earlier. Is there really a leadership transition program across board? Do we have a thinking where a person having served in a particular capacity of leadership, whether in the private and in the public sector, there's a transition to go and rest, so to say, or to move on to, and that's, and you see, a leadership transition program should cater to everything. Mm-hmm. So you've spent 6 years in a position of leadership. During that period of leadership, there's sort of a structure that is put in place for you to ensure that you are mentoring, Samson doesn't like my word, or grooming the younger generation. And then as you transition to another phase, that phase is probably a phase where you're still in a mentorship capacity of leadership. I think that is absent. I also think that, and that's why this is where I said I want to be cautious, but I will say this is my perspective. I think there is insecurity with our older generation. An insecurity of not being sure that if I hand this task to the younger generation, they will deliver as needed or as desired. It's beyond even a trust, well, so to say, trust deficit, but am I sure that this young person can deliver on this? You see elders always wanting to step into the room when young people are working and it's like, you're not doing it right. Why don't you do this? And it's not to give that independence for young people to do as they wish, to hone their creativity and even break the rules, so to say, this so-called rules, and come up with new ideas. It's also a preponderance of an old system that must flow a particular way. I think those, for me, are some of the issues that see younger people or older people not ready to pass the baton. But then there's also another aspect of this conversation, and I think we need to take our minds to that aspect. It's the fact that we're speaking to less than 1 to 5% of leadership positions that even exist. The majority of leadership positions exist across board. In public service, in a small office where you have a director, a manager, or what have you, in a private sector, in Dr. Obina's development space, in a shop, in a plaza. See, leadership is happening everywhere. And I think the conversation of building leadership needs to be taken away from the public, from the preponderance of its focus on the public service to every sector of our daily lives. In small offices where you have a supervisor and his supervisee, so to say, what is the leadership model? What is the mentorship happening? I am very sure among the three of us here, and including Samson, who is in Accra, that we are in one way or the other mentoring one or two, three people. We are in one way or the other training people on the ropes of our own trade, medicine, law, advocacy as well. There's a leadership burden in every one of us in different spheres, and I think that there is the need that for us to have that consciousness that wherever we find ourselves, needless to be public service, needless to be in appointee positions, needless to be in elective positions. And you see, even these elective positions can only feed off well when across board we have young competent leaders. Okay. So you set up a company today, an IT company, and you're a young fellow, 35, 36, maybe even 30, 25. That is a position of leadership. You bring in a pool of your team, and 5, 10 people, so to say, within almost the same age range as you are. That is leadership position, and that already puts you in a position to mentor people. That already gives you an opportunity to start training leaders, because it is from that pool of young people you have gathered to groom, whether it's an IT firm, whether it's a consultancy firm, whether it's a law practice firm, whether it's a developmental space or an NGO. You're brewing leaders at that point, and those are the same leaders who the public space someday will fetch from, either in elective positions or in appointee positions. Okay. If today the president-elect becomes president, he's sworn in about 2 weeks' time, he says, I need somebody who is good and is going to give me some super changes in the healthcare system. He's going to fetch somebody, he wants to fetch somebody like an Obina. And where is he going to fetch him from? From the private sector. Okay. So I think we need to understand that the grooming for leadership is and must happen at every place and every facet of our lives and wherever we find ourselves.
Right, we have another caller now, Abdul Majid Saad, calling in from Abuja. Hello. Abdul Majid, hello.
Hello.
Yes, go right ahead.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good evening, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. How did I wish to extend my greetings to all the participants in the studio. I'm very delighted by this topic today. My contributions go like this. Moving forward, since we have a new president-elect, I would like to suggest that for us to have the kind of desired ideas and views expressed in the studio and those that we have outside the studio, we should have a proper national youth policy, which is presently non-existent. I think having a national youth development policy will go a long way in bringing the kind of change we need in the country. Secondly, we need to promote proficiency in all aspects of youth life. Proficiency is very necessary and it should be encouraged by government. Whether you're in business or in politics, there is need for the young people to be seen to be professionals in what they do. And government will address that through the national development policy. And thirdly, I would like to advise the President-elect and every public officer to have a periodic interaction with young people at all levels, be it on the TV or through the ICT technology platforms we have. Proper engagements periodically will go a long way in reviewing the policy we have and ensuring a very sustainable development. Thank you. These are my few contributions. I salute you for this program. It is timely, and I think it will go a long way in bringing the kind of development we desire.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for calling in. Well, let's go back to something one more time. And there's an aspect of this that we usually do not talk about, and I just want to bring it in here. One or maybe two aspects of it. Now, the effects of modern day living on the youth. That's on one side of it, what they're exposed to, the kind of exposure they receive. And here I'm not limiting this to positive, but I'm also thinking of the negative aspects too as well. Things that have affected the development and growth of our youth. Something that the older generation did not have to deal with in their time. Yes, the internet does come with all kinds of advantages, but there is also some part of it that it's what people worry about. The Gen Zs and the millennials, as they say, their ways are not our ways. And sometimes unconventional things and attitudes and foreign cultures. In case of this part of the country, I want us to look at that against the backdrop of what is now known as the Japa syndrome, where you have very many young, talented, skilled people living the shores of the country. And the older generation are saying, no, why don't you step back and build? I'd like you to speak along those lines.
Well, it's an interesting phenomenon for three reasons. The first one develops from the fact that human beings, by their nature, by our nature as human beings, we're migrants. We move from one place to another. And all this is in pursuit for a good life, is in pursuit for economic or political opportunities. It's also in pursuit for happiness. And so there's absolutely nothing wrong if people want to migrate from one particular point to another, because human beings, by our very nature, that's who we are. If you're in a particular society and the opportunities are limited, there's inequality, the natural instinct of every human being is to look for a better life. So I don't think we can or we should fault that. What we should be more concerned about is how are we creating economic and political opportunities for people in country. That's one. Two, when you talk about modern day living, I think it's important to also recognize that societies are not static in nature. Societies are designed in a way that they are dynamic. The priorities, the norms and standards of the last 20 years may not be relevant. It might be obsolete today. We've talked about the fact that, this is the most networked generation in human history. And so that tells you that the nature of human interaction and relationship have been disrupted. This is an age where you don't necessarily have to be within the confines of a physical office, to deliver results. You can work remotely. This is the era where people are saying, oh, we don't want to show up at polling units to vote. We want to just vote, from the comfort of our homes and on our phones. This is their time, and we shouldn't criminalize, their aspiration. We shouldn't, make them feel that, it is wrong to be Gen Zs. I think that what we need to do is to first, recognize that they are operating in a different world. And because they are operating in a different world, they are making demands that perhaps might be unsettling for the older generation. And I think that there has to be humility on both ends, that the older generation need to be humble, to listen to these young people and what they are saying, because they are speaking from the streets, they are speaking on social media, they are using their phones, so that humility is required on the part of the older generation to listen to what these young people are saying, understand their values, their grievances, their aspirations. It's critical. We've got to understand that and not just wish them away. Then these Gen Zs also need to be humble to also listen and also learn from the older generation. So there's some level of responsibility, because this generation, are asking very difficult questions. They deserve answers. Perhaps the way they ask the question might need some review, because every society, has got its norms and cultures and standards that have been existent for decades. And so if you want to change those cultures, it's going to take time. And I think that sort of intergenerational engagement it's what's required. But this particular Gen Zs, honestly, I'm quite, from a personal point of view, I'm actually excited that they are really interested in engaging the political process, and I see it more as an opportunity. We just need to understand them better and see how we harness the potential that is in this particular generation. But I also want them to note that there's nothing that is happening today that has never happened before. We've seen these things, it's just that it's manifesting in a different form. Yes, you might have exponential growth in your population. There have been demographic shifts. But I tell you, the music that they talk about so much, if you go through history, 40 years ago, this same music was also played and produced. Is it the dressing? But let's see them more as assets and see how we mobilize them. And this is why when you talk about those investments, things like education, things like health, things like security, things like jobs, and also political opportunity. And Cyril, quite frankly, the three guests who are in the studio, have spoken with so much brilliance and eloquence. And this isn't just articulation. It's also the fact that they've demonstrated, understanding of what public leadership is, as well as Nigeria. Why shouldn't these individuals be appointed or given opportunities to hold leadership? Why should they, continually serve as either spokespersons or campaign merchants for political leaders? Yes, sometimes you're told you have to pay, you have to contribute to the party, but honestly, we lose as a society when if you have these young people who demonstrate this kind of capacity and not given leadership positions. Instead, you have people who have stolen ballot boxes, people who have served as thugs, are the ones who are rewarded with public leadership. There's something fundamentally wrong. And I think that when you talk about inclusivity and national development, these are the kind of people who should be given visibility, the kind of people who should be empowered and given the responsibility, and not substitute, them with people who do not deserve any opportunity in public leadership. Because what you do is you undermine our development, and it doesn't spell well for our country.
All right. Okay. Another caller on the line, this time Patrick calling in from Cross River State. Patrick, if you're there, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, Patrick, if you're with us.
Okay, hello, sorry. I want to talk in respect of what my brother Johannes Toby was talking about.
Right.
If you check, first I must commend President Muhammad Buhari for signing the not too young to run. That second, I will also talk about the level, like the youth that are young and capable enough to join the that are ready for politics. So what I will say for the government to do for us that will help us is that they should come and or maybe pass a bill to commission to form a commission that or agency that will teach or that will tell us the youth what to do, mentor us, give us the necessary education in that aspect of politics, so that we can be able to join those people that are in the big sector in the political aspect, like the House of Representatives and the House of Senate, so that with due time, you will see most of us that are youth in those positions. So that is it. That's what I have for you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick from Cross River. Well, back here, you are a youth and gender advocate. So as we look into what's coming, what are the best ways to build and include the youth so they can give off the skills that they have acquired, the energy they have to serve the fatherland and help build and shape a better country?
I would say that communication is very important. Samson touched on that while he was answering the question about the modern way of living and the new generation of young people. And I would say that it's very important, as he said, that we have a two-way communication system that enables us to hear directly from young people, to listen to their concerns, to understand things from their perspective, and also to be able to communicate, those in authority to communicate properly to young people as well. And I would also revert to a point I made earlier about the fact that one of the reasons why we have a lot of youth restiveness and why young people seem to be very apathetic towards things to do with politics or to be very strongly anti-government is because they don't see a government that looks like them. They don't see people within government who represent them. They feel like there's a disconnect, nobody understands them, they're not prioritized, and I'm hoping that we can correct that going into the next administration. Having young people in strategic positions that sends a clear message to the younger generation that says that there's room for you within the leadership of your country. There is room for you when it comes to making decisions in your country. There is room for you in the politics and governance of your country, and you matter, you're a priority. We want your views to count, because if you don't have young people at the table, young people's views are not going to be reflected in the kind of policies and the kind of laws that we make. So representation is very key. World over, you'll find that in the US, for instance, the private sector, and in other developed countries, we have policies, for instance, geared at ensuring diversity in the management of those organizations. Diversity when it comes to gender, when it comes to race. Representation is key, because when you see somebody who looks like you occupy a certain position, it just dispels whatever notions that you might have had that that particular thing is not for you. So we have to be very deliberate about doing the same thing with governance. We need to signal to the younger generation that there is space for them, there's room for them, and that we really do value our young people, and that we want young people on board, and that their views matter. Then I would also like to comment on some comments made earlier by those who called in. For Mr. Patrick, it's not government per se that's going to teach you civic education. We could have programs targeted at that, maybe through the National Orientation Agency, but government agencies often have funding challenges that impact how much they're able to do. We have civil society organizations that have stepped up to fill that gap. Some have made it so easy that you can subscribe to their classes online. You can get to learn about the political process and how to engage. And I would just tell people there is no right time for doing anything. You want to join politics, look at where you're from, look at the parties that are prominent there, look at the parties that you agree with when it comes to ideology, go to your ward and join a party, you will learn the ropes. So I think we as young people, we need to stop being reluctant to get into the water. If you're going to do it, get in, just do it. Because politics, for as long as you keep waiting and then you keep waiting and you keep trying to find who will teach you the ropes and all of that, mentorship is key. It's very important that we learn, but also in his own personal time, he can find time to do some research on how governance works in Nigeria. Something as simple as knowing that there's no House of Senate, it's just a Senate. And it's the House of Assembly at state level, House of Reps at federal. So these are things that we can also do on our own. I think there was social studies in primary school. Those in arts class and commercial got to have government classes. These are things that we can learn. We don't necessarily need the government to teach us how to engage in politics. So as young people, we also need to be more proactive. And there was a comment earlier also about the need for a national youth policy. We already have one. So again, as young people, I think it's also very key that we try to keep ourselves updated about developments in government, especially as it pertains to young people and the development of those who belong to that age bracket.
Right, thank you so much. Samson talked about a number of issues affecting the development of the youth, and you, Dr. Obin Iberem, a public health physician, I'd like you to talk along those lines, especially when it comes to youth and health, and importantly, certain habits.
So yes, so there's a lot of health issues that affect you specifically, and these are real issues. And I will argue that some of these issues have been neglected because we have left out youths on the decision table. And I believe that once there's a change where youths then come and are part of those making decisions, we will then bring up this issue. One of the issues that I want to talk about is issue of drug abuse, right? There is a lot of, it's a big problem in the streets, especially in the urban areas, right? That needs to, adolescent health, right? It's a key issue that needs to be highlighted. Most times that is relegated, right? So these are issues that are specific to young people. And then also issues around mental health is something that needs to also be highlighted. A lot of young people are depressed. A lot of young people have various mental issues that because there is no greater awareness about these mental health issues, we then spiritualize it, right? Or we neglect it, right? A lot of young people who are sent, who, you know, when you talk about the, my colleague Toby mentioned, it's not just about political leadership. When you talk about maybe in the security agencies, most of the people who go to war, who help to keep the country safe, are young people in the army. After they go for all these special missions and they come back, does anyone take care of their mental health? Most of them have a lot of trauma, right? Post-traumatic disorders, right? Because this is something that affects this population, and this population or this demographic, they are not represented. These are not being highlighted. But when we have that conscious shift where we're now including young people on the table, right, in making them part of decision makers and not just keeping them at the fringes where they are essays, advisors, or PAs or that, you will then see that the young person on the table will then think of, okay, what is that affects a fellow young person, either in the army, in the public sector. Most young people might not have the resources to get a car in the public sector, right? So then a young person will think of, how do I make sure that there is a good public transportation system that caters for fellow young people? So it speaks about, and so there are a lot of things, especially I've talked about health, but in other sectors, there are things that are specific to young people. And today, what we are saying is that we must be intentional going forward to involve young people. And when we involve young people, what will happen is that we will then see that policies will be broadened. You will see that laws will be broadened. Leadership governance will be broadened in such a way that we are now considering the young population. And at the end of it all, we will be better off because we will now make laws, policies that have the human heart, that thinks about the greater population, the young people. And then when we implement it, we see that the citizens will be happier because they will feel that they were considered when those policies, those laws were formulated.
All right, at this point, we'll take another of our reports. This one is from Oka.
Investigation reveals that Nigerian youths are resilient, creative, and innovative. Channeling these positive attributes promotes development of the nation. A cross-section of people in Oka, the Anambra State capital, said when youths are empowered to play their role, they will positively impact on the economy.
So many people don't even use their certificates anymore. They have a lot of skills, a lot of talent, and they just need funding. So if government can provide an avenue where the STEMI youths can access loan for very minimal interest rates, I think it will be very nice, and it will go a long way in providing job opportunities for the youths.
I encourage the government to set up a lot of skill acquisition centers whereby youths will be trained on different aspects of skills, so that at the end of the program they'll be able to be independent on their own.
If you consider the number of graduates that come out from the university every year, you see the need to expand our industry. First of all, the government can create more industries to accommodate these youths, so that everybody will not be going for a white-collar job. There are other things that they can do, like when they create manufacturing industry owned by the government. These youths can be employed there.
Youth see politics as a dirty job, and they want to engage in service that will make their life dangerous or their future. So we have to make politics, first of all, safe, and then open it up to you that make the funds available and easily affordable. And then with the youths, it's also left for us to avail ourselves the opportunity to also be engaged and enrolled in any of the openings they have. Like I myself would like to vie for maybe chancellor, but I don't think I can afford it for my little salary from where I'm working now. What if it's affordable? Perhaps I would like to try.
Apart from creation of job opportunities, others said youths should also avail themselves of their youthful energy to initiate innovations and shun all sorts of behavior that will impact negatively on the country.
In fact, we know that we have so many talents in this country. In our school curriculum, it should be incorporated a lot of vocational studies, both practical and theoretical aspect of it. In that way, by the time these youths are out from secondary school, they can engage themselves in one form of vocation or the other.
The importance of youth in nation building cannot be overemphasized. In Oka, Onome, Okadibo.
Right, back to the studios. We've seen a number of challenges, a number of areas that the country could improve upon in order to create a better environment for the development of the youth. And we've talked about health. Dr. Obinna talked about health. I'd like us to move to an area that is requiring a lot of changes, and that's in education. One of the respondents on the last report we just aired talked about acquiring vocational skills. But this brings us back to the question of developing the education system as to cater to the now needs of young people who we're expecting to be the drivers of the country.
You know, what comes to mind as I watch the report from Oka is, I don't know if I'm saying it right, but they say that a Nigerian is the only person you push to the wall and that he finds a ladder. So the thing, one of the words that was said there is the resilience of the Nigerian young person.
That's true.
The average Nigerian young person will find something to do. The average Nigerian young person, whether he's skilled or unskilled, you take him to a workshop, a mechanic workshop, and he's jobless. He will tell you, I can fix your tire for you. It's only a Nigerian that will see your car parked and you are trying to fix up something on your bonnet is open, and he will pass by and say, let me try and help you, and he has no idea what you're doing. It's only the Nigerian that will come up with the most brilliant, the most craziest ideas to want to fix things, to want to create business ideas and what have you. It simply shows that the average young Nigerian has the capacity to do and undo, to do great things. But what has been lacking? The environment, the capacity, the opportunities. I'll borrow a word that I think Mr. Sampson has emphasized over and over and over again, and perhaps I would help to overemphasize it. Investment. Now, pulling it down or marrying it with this particular issue of education. Nigeria as a country needs to invest in the capacity development of our young people. And let's not look at education from the straight-jacketed point of view of the four walls of a classroom. I think we need to rethink what education means to Nigeria. We have different skills that can be learned by young people, and not just bead making or soap making or some of these things that are I would say just pedestrian, but things that are sophisticated. The world is changing. How many young people in Nigeria can compete at 15, 13, 12 years with their contemporaries in Europe, in China, in Australia, in the US? Can they match them skill for skill? What are those skills of the 21st century, or let me say the fourth industrial revolution? Artificial intelligence, computing, there's a cryptocurrency craze. We need to arm our young people with the skills of the 21st century. We need to ensure that it is not just the classroom learning. You know, Rinsola was talking about the kinds of opportunities that one can, you flip your computers today and you can get on any course. There's Udemy, there's all the various Future Learn and what have you. There's so many courses you can take as a young person online. I think government, for a starting point or as a Kickstarter, needs to find ways to bring so many young people to take advantage of these opportunities. We need to look at partnerships. We need to look at stakeholders that they can be instrumental to empowering our young population. One other area, and I think it's been emphasized lately in political campaigns, is empowering young people in skill development. And it starts from our tertiary education centers. This whole notion of, you know, theoretical learning and theoretical learning and theoretical learning is not necessarily going to help the bulge of our population. We need to create a mindset of young people who can work in factories, who can work in the manufacturing industry, who have technical skills, because technical skills are the skills of the future. Germany, China, the young people there may not necessarily have master's degrees or BScs, but they sure do have technical skills to work in the BMW factories, to work in the Mercedes-Benz factories, to work in Japan, the Panasonic factories and what have you. Those are the kinds of skills that we need to be training our young people to have in this age. Skills in electricity, skills in building, in architecture and what have you. So I think the concept of education needs to change with the times. Right. We need to de-emphasize this. Our young men must go into professional courses, medicine or law, with due respect, mass communication. so the concept of learning must change to become a skill-oriented learning that makes our young people attuned with the 21st century and the fourth industrial revolution.
All right. Do we still have Princess on the line from Abakaliki? I believe we do, or we don't? Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for staying on the line. Princess from Abakaliki, you'd, of course, be our last caller tonight. Go ahead. It's a question or comment.
Hello?
I thought we had a princess from Abakaliki.
This is Prince.
That voice sounds like Prince. But anyway, go ahead all the same. You're on. Hello? Do we have the caller on the line? Okay. If you're on the line, just introduce yourself and go ahead with your comment. All right. I think the caller is a bit shy. Okay, we'll just have to move on. That could have been our last caller tonight, but all right. Hello. Are you with us?
Hello?
Hello, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, hello. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hello?
Oh dear. If you could hear me, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Yes, we're listening. We're waiting to hear from you. Go ahead. Tell us your name and let's hear your comment. All right, we'll have to. Oh well, we'll have to move on. Okay, so we're on the last lap of the program now, and so we'll just go over to Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa, who's in Accra, Ghana, and ask you to make your closing comments as we begin to wind down on this conversation. Samson.
Three things I'll take from this discussion is that one, if the country, if Nigeria wants to make progress, which we should make progress, we don't have any excuses not to, then it's important to ensure that young people are not only engaged, they are empowered, and they are given the opportunity to contribute their quota to national development. That's one. Secondly, that the country suffers more when it fails to harness the potential of young people. Because if you think about Nigeria in 2050, you think about Nigeria in 2060, is a Nigeria that will be occupied by the young people of today. So the kind of investments that we make in these young people, either education or health or jobs, will determine whether there will be a Nigeria, a prosperous Nigeria in the next 20 or 30 years. And the third major takeaway is the fact that, yes, we've got a new administration that is coming into office. It's important that it takes its youth agenda very seriously, whether it's youth economic agenda or youth political agenda. It needs to take it seriously and ensure that young people are part of the decision making process, because their energy, their resilience, their creativity is what Nigeria needs if it will leapfrog its development from where it currently is.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa. Thanks for being part of this conversation, and wish you well. Thank you. Good night. Well, back here in the studio. Yes, back here in the studio, Emisola Abiola.
Yes, sir. My closing comments.
Yes.
Okay, so I would say that it's very important that as young people, we understand that we need to continuously engage the process. We can't all be politicians, but we can all be active citizens. So whether we're young, female, male, as long as we're young, we have to understand that we have the bulk of the population of this country. Whatever decisions will be made will affect us a lot more, and on a much longer term basis. Nigeria is the only country that we have to call home. We could leave Japa to God knows where, but home will always be home, and we have to contribute our quota to developing our country. So we have to remain active and engaging with the process. We need to understand how government works so that we're able to engage from a place of knowledge. And as much as we can, we also need to refrain from sharing content that could cause panic, especially on social media. Fake news is very harmful to our development as a nation, and we need to, as much as possible, be careful the kind of things that we share. We don't want to experience violence. The older generation who have experienced it, they will tell you that it's a horrible thing. We should not have a repeat. So I would also like to appeal to those, especially who are given to secessionist kind of talk from different parts of the country, to please stop promoting that kind of narrative, especially on social media. It's very harmful, and it won't do us well in the long run at all.
All right, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us tonight, Rinsola Abiola.
Happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Right. Let's go over to Dr. Omin Naibirim and listen to you close down.
Yes, I think I just want to pick out some of the major points. So the first is there is need for a change in mindset that young people can, and there's need for greater trust in young people. And why that is being done by the political class, by the current leaders we have today, the older generation. For the young people, we should also realize the points that have been made that, as the president-elect will say, power is not shared a la carte, right? You need to get involved. You need to show your capacity. And as I've been mentioned today, it's not just capacity in public service, even in the private sector. Show your capacity so that you will be remembered and given a great opportunity. And then finally, we need to also be intentional about including young people. Young people have done well in other sectors, in business, in health, in education. We need to get them into governance, because when they're on the table, they know, they bring a perspective different from others. And what would happen at the end of the day is that we're making better policies, better laws, we are governing better, because this major a proportion of the population, the young people, are now on the table, and they are ensuring that what matters to them, be it mental health, be it adolescent health, those things are included in conversation, in laws, in policies. Let's get youths involved. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And well, Your Highness Toby Wojuola, in just a couple of minutes.
Well, I don't think I just have two things. One is that a chain is as weak or is as strong as its weakest link. If young people do not get it right, and this is not just a message for the old or for the young, it's for every one of us. If we don't get it right with the younger generation, we would have problems in the country. We need to get it right. And then secondly is the fact that, to re-emphasize what Rinsola has said, this is the country we have. I understand that migration is an open opportunity and everybody has a right to migrate, but we must understand that when we migrate to other countries, we're migrating to countries that have been built by people. They built their civilizations for themselves, and that is why we're running there. We need to understand that we have our own civilization to build for ourselves, and that is the mindset every young Nigerian should understand, that this country is not going to look like Europe if we don't make it the Europe for ourselves.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been interesting talking to you on this, but we have to leave it there.
Absolutely.
And so that's our program. We thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with NTA Tuesday Live. I'm Cyril Stober. Continue to stay safe.
you.